Welcome back to another episode of the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and I'm so glad you're here with me today. Whether you're walking to work, doing the dishes, or just relaxing with your headphones on, thank you for choosing to spend this time learning and growing with us. Our goal is always to help you speak English more confidently, naturally, and with less stress. And today's episode is one that speaks to a very common struggle. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever found yourself understanding almost everything in English? You watch movies, listen to podcasts like this one, maybe even read books or follow the news. But when it's time to speak, your mind goes completely blank. You know the words, you've studied the grammar, you've spent hours learning. But in a real conversation, you freeze. Does that sound familiar? You're not alone. That experience is more common than you might think. In fact, I hear it from people all around the world. People from Rome, Tokyo, Cape Town, Buenos Aires, Bangkok, and so many more. They all share the same frustration. I understand English, but I can't speak it fluently. And the truth is, it's not because you're not smart enough. It's not because you haven't studied enough. It's because the way most of us learn English is focused on the wrong goal. We're taught to memorize grammar rules, write essays, pass exams, and translate from our native language. But speaking, that's a completely different skill. And if we want to get better at it, we need a different approach. This episode is for you if you're tired of feeling stuck. If you're ready to finally speak English with more confidence and to see real progress, faster than ever before. We're going to talk about what actually works, based on the experiences of people just like you. We'll explore practical steps, small changes you can make today that will have a huge impact on your ability to speak English more fluently and naturally. And we're going to do it together, in a way that's simple, clear, and encouraging. Now, before we dive into all of that, I want to remind you of something important. The English Talk community is more than just a podcast. It's a global community of learners, people who are just like you, working toward the same goal, to communicate better in English. And every time you hit that like button or subscribe to this podcast, you're not only supporting this content, you're helping us reach more people around the world who need it. You're also telling yourself, yes, I'm committed to this, I'm ready to grow. So if you find this helpful, take a second right now to like, subscribe, and maybe even share this episode with someone who's also trying to improve their English. It makes a big difference, for us and for you. All right, take a deep breath. Shake off any pressure you might be feeling. This isn't a test, and you don't have to be perfect here. We're just having a conversation. I want you to feel comfortable, to relax a bit, and to really take in what we're about to talk about. Think of this as your time, your space, to get inspired and to reflect on what's possible for you. No matter where you're starting from, you can become more fluent. And I'm here to help guide you step by step. Let me also say this. Fluency isn't something magical that only a few people can achieve. It's not a talent. It's not about being good at languages. It's a skill. And like any skill, it can be developed. But it needs the right kind of training. The kind of practice that doesn't just happen in a classroom or inside a textbook. Real fluency comes from real use, from speaking often, from making mistakes, from learning through experience. And most importantly, it comes from confidence. Not the kind of confidence that says, I know everything, but the kind that says, I'm not afraid to try. So today we're going to focus on how to build that confidence and how to speak more, faster, and with more ease. You don't need a perfect accent. You don't need advanced grammar. What you need is consistency, clarity, and a strategy that works for your daily life. I know that sounds simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. And that's why I'm here with you, to make this journey easier and more enjoyable. I also want you to think about your own story for a moment. What brought you to English? Was it work, travel, family, or maybe just a personal goal you set for yourself? Whatever your reason, I want you to remember it. That motivation is powerful, and it's what will carry you forward on the days when progress feels slow. And it's okay if those days come. We all have them. But with the right mindset and the right tools, you'll keep moving forward. As we begin this conversation about the fastest way to improve your English speaking, I want you to keep an open mind. Some of the tips might sound different from what you've heard before. Some of them might even challenge the way you've been learning. But that's a good thing, because real change comes when we're willing to try something new. And I promise, everything we'll talk about today is based on what actually works in real life. Not in theory, not in a classroom, but in real situations, with real people who made real progress. You'll hear stories from learners across the globe. People who were once just like you, struggling to find the words, afraid to speak, unsure if they would ever sound fluent. These are people who made a shift, not because they were perfect students, but because they were consistent, patient, and open to learning in new ways. You'll hear about a man from Warsaw who turned his morning routine into a language lab. A woman from Cairo who changed her entire mindset with one simple technique. And others who discovered that the secret to fluency wasn't about studying harder, it was about using English in a smarter, more practical way. This episode is about action. It's about giving you ideas that you can apply right away, not someday. If you're willing to try just one new thing after listening, that's already progress. And if you keep going, step by step, you'll be amazed at how fast your speaking improves. The goal here is not to be perfect. It's to be understood, to feel comfortable expressing yourself, and to enjoy the process of learning, even when it feels a little messy. So wherever you are right now, at home, at work, commuting, or just relaxing, I want you to settle in, open your mind, and get ready. Because what you're about to hear could change the way you think about speaking English forever. Let me ask you something that might sound simple, but is actually one of the biggest hidden problems in English learning. Why do so many people stay stuck at the same level for years? Why is it that someone can study for 5, even 10 years, and still feel nervous when they have to speak? Still hesitate before saying something out loud? Still translate every sentence in their head before speaking, afraid they might say something wrong? The answer is not what most people expect. It's not a lack of vocabulary. It's not grammar mistakes. It's not even pronunciation. The truth is, the number one reason most learners stay stuck is because they are chasing something impossible: perfection. They believe that before they can speak fluently, they need to speak perfectly. They think every sentence must be correct. Every word must be precise. Every pronunciation must sound like a native speaker. And this belief becomes a trap. Here's the thing. When you believe you need to be perfect, you create fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of sounding bad. And what happens when you feel afraid? You stop speaking. You wait. You hesitate. You tell yourself, I'll speak when I'm ready. But that moment of being ready never comes, because the goal of perfection keeps moving farther away. It becomes a mountain you can't climb. I've seen this happen over and over again with learners from Paris, Seoul, São Paulo, and New Delhi. People who are smart, motivated, and hardworking, but they feel stuck. They can understand English, they study every day, they pass grammar tests. But when it's time to speak in real life, something blocks them. Their mind races. Their mouth freezes. They want to say something, but they're too focused on what not to say, too worried about the right way to speak. So they stay quiet, and that silence becomes a habit. This is what I want to help you break. Because the truth is, fluency doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from using the language, even when it's not perfect. It comes from practice, from repetition, from making mistakes and learning from them. It comes from allowing yourself to be human, imperfect, but always improving. The people who become fluent fastest are not the ones who make the fewest mistakes. They're the ones who speak the most. They try, they stumble, they laugh at their own errors, and they keep going. They build confidence through action, not through theory. Let me tell you a quick story. There was a young man named Diego from Madrid. He had been studying English for over 7 years. He knew all the grammar rules, scored high on his English exams, and even worked in a company that used English in emails and documents. But when his boss asked him to give a presentation in English, he panicked. He froze. He couldn't speak fluently, even though he knew the topic. Why? Because every sentence in his head had to be perfect before he could say it out loud. He was editing himself while trying to speak. Now compare that to Lena, a woman from Jakarta who started learning English just 2 years ago. Her grammar wasn't perfect. Her vocabulary was still growing, but she practiced speaking every single day. Not writing, not just reading, speaking, out loud, with herself, with friends, with language partners online. She made mistakes, yes, a lot of them. But she didn't stop. She didn't wait for perfection. And within a year, she was able to hold conversations confidently with people from all over the world. What's the difference between Diego and Lena? Diego waited for perfection before he spoke. Lena spoke, and that's how she improved. This is the mindset shift that changes everything. If you keep trying to be perfect, you'll speak less, not more. But if you focus on practice, you'll get better every time you speak. You'll stop being afraid of mistakes and start seeing them as your most powerful teachers. There's also something else that happens when you chase perfection. You become passive. You become a listener, a reader, a silent observer of the language. But English is a tool for communication. That means it has to be used, spoken, shared. It's not meant to live in your notebook or in your mind. It's meant to come out of your mouth. And that only happens when you stop trying to be perfect and start trying to connect. Another thing I've noticed is how people often compare themselves to native speakers. They say, "I'll never sound like that," or "I'll never be as good." But here's the truth. Even native speakers make mistakes. They forget words. They repeat themselves. They correct their own sentences as they talk. The goal of learning English is not to sound like someone else. It's to sound like yourself, in English. And the only way to do that is by speaking as much as possible without the pressure of being perfect. I once worked with a woman from Istanbul named Yasemin. She had a beautiful voice and a very warm personality, but she was always silent in meetings at her international job. Her coworkers thought she didn't speak much English, but that wasn't true. She was just afraid of saying something wrong. After one coaching session, she decided to speak up once per meeting, even if it was just one sentence. At first, she was nervous, but something amazing happened. People started listening. They didn't care about her small grammar mistakes. They cared about her ideas. That one small step built her confidence, and in just 3 months, she was leading entire meetings in English. This is how it starts. Not with big, perfect moments, but with small, imperfect actions taken again and again. You don't need more grammar lessons. You don't need to memorize long vocabulary lists. You need to speak more. You need to stop judging yourself. You need to believe that progress is more important than perfection. Think about this. Children don't learn their first language by studying grammar. They learn by listening, copying, trying, failing, laughing, repeating. That's the most natural way to learn. But somewhere along the way, adults forget this. We think we need to understand everything before we use it. But language doesn't work that way. You understand by using it. Speaking is the fastest way to learn. Not thinking about speaking. Not planning to speak. Actually speaking. Out loud. Every day. If you've been stuck at the same level for a long time, it's probably because you've been focused on being correct, not on being communicative. But communication is messy. It's real. It's alive. And it doesn't wait for perfect grammar. So let yourself speak even if it's not perfect, especially if it's not perfect, because every time you speak, you take one step closer to fluency. And that's what matters most. If you're listening to this right now and thinking, yes, this is exactly what I've been needing, then I want to take a quick moment to invite you to do something really simple, but incredibly helpful. Subscribe to our podcast and leave a like or a review. I know it might seem like a small thing, something easy to skip, but it makes a huge difference. Not just for us as a community, but for you as a learner too. Let me tell you why. When you subscribe and engage, you're not just following a podcast. You're joining thousands of English learners around the world who, just like you, want to improve, grow, and finally speak English with confidence. This is not just another show. This is a space where we learn together, where stories from real people become practical tools for your everyday speaking practice. By subscribing, you're officially part of the English Talk community. And that means you're no longer learning alone. Think of it like this. Every time you like an episode or hit that subscribe button, you're casting a vote for the kind of content you want more of. You're helping us know what matters to you, what inspires you, what helps you move forward. And in return, we keep bringing you better, more focused, more practical episodes that actually help you speak English more naturally and more confidently. You get better content. We grow stronger as a community. Everyone wins. This is especially powerful when you realize how motivation works. You see, motivation isn't something that appears out of nowhere. It comes from momentum. When you take action, any action, you send a message to your brain that this matters, that you're serious about this journey. And even something as small as clicking like or subscribing creates that little spark. It builds momentum. It turns passive listening into active participation. And that's the kind of energy that leads to real progress. Now, if you're someone who has been listening to different podcasts or watching English learning videos, but never really engages, this is your chance to change that. Don't just be a listener. Be a part of something. Be an active learner. Join a movement of people from London to Lagos, from Manila to Milan, from Cairo to Chicago, who are all working on the same goal, to become fluent, confident English speakers. And here's something else. When you engage, you're not just helping yourself. You're helping others too. Your like, your subscription, your comment or review, they all tell the platforms, hey, this content is valuable. And that means more people can discover it. People who might be struggling in silence. People who need this message today. People who are just like you were, trying to find something that actually works. We've seen this happen so many times. One listener shares an episode, another person finds it by chance, and suddenly they have a breakthrough. They realize they're not alone. They hear a story that sounds just like theirs, and that story gives them the push they needed to keep going. You can be part of that chain. That small action, just tapping a button, can create real change for someone else. Maybe you've been feeling stuck in your learning. Maybe you've felt frustrated because your English doesn't reflect how much you understand. Or maybe you've just been tired of starting over. This podcast is here to support you, not with complicated lessons or boring explanations, but with real conversations, real stories, and strategies you can actually use. And when you subscribe, you're telling yourself, I'm in this for real. I'm not just dreaming about fluency, I'm building it. And here's a little reward that comes with that choice. Every week, you'll get fresh, focused, relevant content made just for learners like you. No more guessing what to listen to next. No more searching for motivation. Just consistent, powerful content that keeps you connected to your goal. And all of that starts with one simple step: subscribing and liking this episode. Let's be honest. Learning English can feel lonely sometimes, especially when the people around you don't speak it, or when you feel like you're the only one making mistakes or struggling to express yourself. But this community is different. We are learners from every corner of the world, united by one goal: And when you take that step to subscribe, you're joining something much bigger than just a podcast. You're joining a family of learners who support each other, celebrate each other, and grow together. And if you're someone who loves consistency, who wants to create a solid routine for your English practice, subscribing is one of the best decisions you can make. It gives you structure. It gives you a reason to keep going. It helps you build a habit. And that habit turns into progress. Week after week, episode after episode, step by step, you become the kind of speaker who doesn't just understand English, but uses it, lives it, enjoys it. So right now, wherever you are, whether you're commuting in Berlin, doing the dishes in Bangkok, walking through the streets of Toronto, or relaxing at home in Johannesburg, take that one small step. Subscribe. Like the episode. Leave a review if you can. Let us know you're here. Let the world know that this kind of learning matters. And most importantly, let yourself feel proud of taking action. Because you deserve to feel confident. You deserve to speak freely. And we are here to help you do exactly that. Every time someone new joins our community, we grow a little stronger. We share more stories, we build more connection, and we make learning English not just something you do, but something you belong to. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And if this episode is helping you in any way, don't keep it to yourself. Show your support. Take 1 second to subscribe and keep walking this path with us, because this is your journey. And now, you're not walking it alone. Have you ever felt that strange gap between understanding English and actually speaking it? You listen to podcasts, watch videos, follow along in conversations, and you understand almost everything. But then, when it's your turn to speak, nothing comes out. Or worse, you start, then freeze. Your mind goes blank, or the words come out slower than you expected. If this sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. In fact, this is one of the most common struggles English learners face. Many people assume that the problem is purely technical. Maybe they need more vocabulary. Maybe their grammar isn't good enough. Maybe they haven't practiced pronunciation enough. But often, the real reason fluency feels so hard has nothing to do with those things. It's emotional. It's mental. It's internal. It has more to do with fear, pressure, and expectations than with your actual level of English. Your brain works differently when you're listening than when you're speaking. When you listen, there's no pressure. You're receiving information, following the flow, and understanding the message. But when you speak, suddenly you're in the spotlight. There's pressure to respond, to be correct, to be quick, to sound natural. And that pressure activates something deeper. Self-doubt. Maybe you've had an experience where someone corrected your English in the middle of a sentence, or maybe you've been laughed at for saying something the wrong way. Maybe you've been in meetings or classrooms where everyone else seemed more fluent than you, and you started to believe you weren't good enough. These experiences don't just affect your confidence, they shape your identity as a speaker. And they plant a powerful idea. Maybe I can understand English, but I just can't speak it. That belief becomes a silent wall between you and fluency. And here's what's even more frustrating. Even after you study more vocabulary, even after you take grammar classes or memorize phrases, the wall is still there. Because you're treating a mindset problem like a technical problem. The truth is most fluency blocks come from fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being judged. Fear of sounding silly or making mistakes. And this fear creates hesitation. It makes you second-guess your words, rethink your sentences, and hold back your voice. You may know what to say, but your brain is too busy checking, fixing, filtering, and by the time you're ready to speak, the moment has passed. Let me tell you about Miguel, a listener from Madrid. He told us that he had been studying English for 10 years. He could read articles, watch Netflix shows in English without subtitles, and understand almost every word. But when he traveled to Chicago for a business conference, he found himself avoiding conversations. At dinner tables, he stayed quiet, During networking events, he smiled politely but said almost nothing. It felt like I had no words, he said, even though I knew all the vocabulary. Miguel wasn't struggling with language. He was struggling with confidence, with fear, with the emotional weight of speaking out loud in a real setting. And his story is not unique. There's Hyejin from Seoul, who told us she felt embarrassed speaking English even in casual situations because she thought her accent made her sound less smart. There's Luca from Milan, who avoided answering calls from international clients because he thought they would notice his grammar mistakes. And then there's Amina from Casablanca, who shared that even after moving to London, she still hesitated to speak in shops and on the street because she felt like she wasn't fluent enough yet. All of these learners had the skills. What they lacked was permission from themselves to speak imperfectly, to be human, to make mistakes. And this is where everything starts to change. Fluency is not about being perfect. It's about being free. It's about being able to express yourself even when it's not perfect. It's about making your message more important than your mistakes. But to do that, you have to change how you think. You have to shift your mindset from performance to communication, from fear to connection, from shame to growth. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to stop measuring fluency by how correct you sound, and start measuring it by how often you try. Every time you speak up, even with mistakes, you are building fluency. Every time you choose to say something out loud, you are training your brain to find words faster. Every time you focus on being understood instead of sounding native, you are becoming a more confident communicator. It's also helpful to realize that native speakers make mistakes all the time. They pause, they repeat themselves, they forget words, they say things incorrectly, and fix them mid-sentence. Communication is messy, and that's okay. Fluency is not a straight, perfect line. It's full of starts and stops, errors and adjustments. The key is to keep going, to keep speaking, to stop treating mistakes as failures and start treating them as part of the process. If you've ever felt like you're not good enough to speak English yet, ask yourself, where did that belief come from? Was it something someone told you? Was it a situation that made you feel small? Or is it just the voice in your head, comparing you to an impossible standard? Whatever it is, that belief is not a fact. It's a feeling. And feelings can be challenged, replaced, rewritten. You don't need a perfect accent to speak fluently. You don't need advanced vocabulary to be clear. You don't need to wait until you're ready. You become ready by speaking. The real obstacle is not your level. It's your belief about your level. The moment you shift that belief, everything else becomes easier. You start showing up in conversations. You start practicing more often. You start enjoying the process. And that's when fluency stops feeling like a distant goal and starts becoming part of your everyday life. Fluency begins in your mindset. It begins when you say, I'm allowed to speak, even if it's not perfect. When you decide that making mistakes is a sign of progress, not failure. When you realize that every conversation, every word, every effort counts. Because it does. Tomas was born and raised in Warsaw, Poland. Like many learners around the world, he started studying English in school from an early age. He went through the typical routine, memorizing vocabulary lists, completing grammar exercises, and passing written exams. He was a dedicated student, and by the time he finished university, Tomas had achieved a high level of comprehension. He could read technical articles in English, watch full seasons of American TV shows without subtitles, and even help friends translate documents when needed. But when it came to speaking, especially in high-stress situations like job interviews, everything changed. Tomas was applying for international positions in tech companies based in Warsaw, with offices in London, Berlin, and Amsterdam. These companies required candidates to participate in interviews conducted entirely in English. Tomas knew he had the qualifications. His resume was strong. He had the experience. But every time he entered a virtual meeting or an in-person interview, in English he would freeze. His answers were short. His voice would tremble. Words that he knew suddenly disappeared. Sentences came out broken or unfinished. After the interviews, he always had the same thought. I could have said so much more. At first, Tomas believed he needed more vocabulary, so he doubled down on his study routine. He bought advanced English textbooks. He started reading business articles from global websites every morning. He even created flashcards with professional phrases like results-oriented and cross-functional collaboration. But the next interview didn't go any better. His mind still went blank when the questions came. It was as if all the vocabulary he had memorized had vanished the moment he needed it most. After a few failed interviews, Tomas felt stuck. He had done everything right, hadn't he? He had studied hard. He had followed the traditional path. But still, he couldn't express himself when it mattered. That's when he realized something important. He had spent years studying English, but almost no time using it. That was a turning point for Tomas. He started reflecting on his habits. Outside of a few university presentations years ago, when had he ever actually spoken English out loud? When had he held a real conversation, especially one where the stakes were high and his words mattered? The answer was almost never. So he changed his approach. First, Tomas joined an online group for job interview practice in English. It was a community made up of people from different countries who met weekly to simulate real interview questions. The first time he joined, Tomas was nervous. His heart was racing. But when it was his turn to answer a question, he pushed himself to speak, even if it came out messy. His answer was not perfect. He hesitated, searched for words, and paused often. But he got through it. And after the session, he received kind and constructive feedback from others in the group. That small moment of progress gave Tomas confidence. He began attending more sessions. Slowly, he noticed something changing. His answers became longer. He stopped translating everything in his head before speaking. He began using expressions he had only seen in writing. He laughed more during the sessions. He even started asking questions back to the group, something he had never done before. Outside the practice group, Tomas made other changes. He started narrating his day in English, just to himself, as he cooked or walked to the store. He recorded voice messages to an old university friend now living in Dublin. He watched interviews with tech professionals and paused to mimic their answers out loud. He wasn't studying in silence anymore. He was interacting with the language, actively using it to build fluency. His next real job interview was with a startup based in Berlin. The interviewer asked Tomas to describe a challenging project and how he overcame it. Tomas took a breath and answered, not with the rehearsed phrases from a textbook, but with a real story. He talked about a software issue his team faced, how they missed a deadline, and how he coordinated with the client to rebuild trust. His grammar wasn't perfect. He made a few mistakes, but his voice was clear, his message was strong, and he felt in control. After that interview, something shifted in Tomas. He realized that fluency was not about saying everything perfectly. It was about showing up in the conversation. It was about being understood. It was about sharing who you are, even if your English has a few cracks. He no longer measured his progress by how many words he memorized, but by how confident he felt when speaking. And slowly, the fear he used to feel before interviews started to disappear. Tomas later landed a remote position with an international company based in Amsterdam. During his first month on the job, he participated in team meetings, shared updates in English, and even gave a short presentation. One of his colleagues from New York messaged him afterward to say, "I really liked the way you explained that last part. Very clear." That message stayed with Tomas. It reminded him that his effort to speak had been worth it. Looking back, Tomas realized that his biggest obstacle hadn't been grammar or vocabulary. It had been the idea that he needed to sound perfect to be taken seriously. Once he let go of that idea, everything else started to flow. He still made mistakes. Everyone does. But he no longer saw those mistakes as signs of failure. He saw them as evidence that he was growing. Tomas's story is not just about language. It's about courage. It's about stepping outside your comfort zone. It's about realizing that fluency comes not from silence and studying, but from connection, risk, and expression. His journey reminds us that the fastest way to improve your English speaking is not to wait until you're ready. It's to start speaking now, even if you feel unsure, even if your sentences aren't smooth, even if your voice shakes. Because the more you speak, the more your voice becomes your own. When people think of speaking English fluently and quickly, they often imagine someone using big, impressive words and long, complex sentences. That's the picture many of us have in our minds. But let me tell you something I've seen again and again with students from all over the world. The people who speak the fastest and the most naturally are usually not the ones with the biggest vocabulary. They're the ones who keep it simple. I know that might sound strange, especially if you've been taught that using advanced English makes you sound more professional or more intelligent. But fluency isn't about sounding like a dictionary. It's about being understood. It's about keeping the conversation flowing. And nothing kills the flow faster than stopping to search for a difficult word or trying to form a complicated sentence. One of the most important lessons I teach my students is this. Speed comes from simplicity. The simpler your language, the faster your brain can access it. When you use common words and repeat familiar structures, your brain doesn't have to work as hard. There's no need to stop, translate, or second-guess yourself. You just speak. Let me give you an example. A few months ago, I was working with a student named Sophia from Madrid. Sophia had an impressive vocabulary. She had studied English for years and knew a lot of advanced words. But when it came time to speak, she froze. She would start a sentence, stop, try to think of the perfect word, and then start again. It was frustrating for her, and it made conversations feel slow and uncomfortable. I asked Sophia to try something different. For 1 week, she was only allowed to use the 500 most common words in English. No fancy vocabulary, no complicated grammar, just short, simple phrases. At first, she felt a little strange. It didn't feel academic enough. But something surprising happened. She started speaking faster. Her confidence grew. Her sentences flowed more naturally. She didn't need to pause and search for words. The language just came, and the best part? People understood her more easily. Her communication became clearer. She started enjoying conversations instead of fearing them. This isn't just true for Sophia. I've seen it with learners in Tokyo, Nairobi, São Paulo, Berlin, everywhere. The more you simplify your speech, the easier it becomes to speak quickly and confidently. Think about native speakers for a moment. When they talk to each other, they're not trying to impress with difficult words. They say things like, let's do it. I don't know. Can you help me? These are basic phrases used over and over again. They're fast, natural, and effective. That's the kind of English you should aim for, language that's alive and automatic. One way to build this kind of fluency is through repetition. I know repetition might sound boring, but it's one of the most powerful tools you have. When you say the same sentence again and again in different situations, it becomes automatic. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to build it from zero every time. It's already there in your mind, ready to be used. I often encourage my listeners to create what I call language blocks. These are small pieces of English you can memorize and use again and again. For example, that's a good question. I'm not sure about that. Let me think. These blocks are simple, but they're incredibly useful. You can use them in so many different conversations, and the more you use them, the faster you get. Another powerful technique is to reduce your vocabulary. I know that sounds like the opposite of what most people try to do. But here's the truth. Trying to use too many new words too soon slows you down. It adds pressure. It makes you focus more on choosing words than expressing ideas. Instead, pick a small group of common words and get really good at using them. Practice them in different ways. Mix them into different sentences. Make them part of your daily speech. Once they feel natural, you can slowly add more words. But always remember, it's better to use 100 words really well than to know 1,000 words and struggle to say anything. There's also a mental shift that happens when you embrace simplicity. You stop trying to perform and start trying to communicate. You stop worrying about how smart you sound and focus on connecting with the person in front of you. And that's where real fluency lives, in connection, not perfection. Let me tell you about another listener, Raj from Mumbai. Raj used to think he needed to speak like a native to be respected at his job. He memorized long business phrases, complicated idioms, and even quotes from famous leaders. But in meetings, he struggled to find the right words. His colleagues sometimes looked confused. Raj felt frustrated. After listening to one of our episodes, Raj changed his approach. He stopped trying to sound perfect and started speaking clearly. He used simple sentences. He repeated key ideas. He focused on making sure everyone understood him. And something amazing happened. People started listening more. They responded better. His meetings became smoother, more productive. And Raj felt proud, not of his vocabulary, but of his progress. So if you feel stuck when speaking English, I want you to ask yourself, am I trying to do too much? Am I using words I don't fully understand? Am I building long sentences that make me nervous? If the answer is yes, I want you to take a step back. Go simpler. Use shorter phrases. Repeat what works. Practice small blocks of language until they become automatic. This is how you build speed. This is how you become fluent. Remember, fluency is not a test. It's not about impressing people. It's about sharing your thoughts with ease. And that ease comes when you stop chasing difficult words and start owning the simple ones. I've seen this work for thousands of learners across the globe, from Seoul to Istanbul, from Lagos to Paris. And I know it can work for you too. Speak simply, speak often, and watch your English come alive. One of the most powerful changes you can make in your English learning journey is also one of the simplest. Start thinking in English. I know it sounds basic. You've probably heard it before. But I want to explain why this one shift can completely change the way you speak and how confident you feel when you do it. Thinking in English isn't just a nice idea. It's a tool that can transform your fluency and speed like nothing else. Let me start by asking you this. How many times have you been in a situation where you understood everything that was being said, but when it was your turn to speak, your mind froze? You had the words in your native language, but not in English. You had to stop, translate, structure the sentence, and by the time you were ready to speak, the moment had passed. That's the result of thinking in your first language. When you translate in your head, everything slows down. First, you think of the idea in your native language. Then you try to find the English words. Then you try to build the sentence. Then you wonder if it sounds right. And all of this happens in just a few seconds, while your brain is under pressure. No wonder you feel stuck. But when you train yourself to think directly in English, everything speeds up. You cut out the middle step. You no longer need to translate. Your brain just goes straight to the word, straight to the sentence, and that's when fluency starts to grow. I've seen this shift make a huge difference for learners in places like Rome, Bangkok, Cape Town, and New York. It doesn't matter where you're from. Once you stop translating and start thinking in English, speaking becomes so much easier. Now you might be wondering, but how do I actually start thinking in English? That's a great question. And the answer is start small. You don't have to think in perfect sentences. You don't need long paragraphs in your head. In fact, the shorter and simpler your thoughts, the better. Let me give you a few examples. When you wake up in the morning, instead of thinking, Vous tomar un café, or Je vais me lever maintenant, just say in your mind, I need coffee, or time to get up. When you're brushing your teeth, say, I'm brushing my teeth. When you're choosing your clothes, say blue shirt or black shirt. These are tiny, simple thoughts, but they train your brain to stay in English. Every small action you take in your daily routine can be a chance to think in English. When you're making breakfast, you can think, I'm boiling water, 2 eggs, where's the spoon? When you're getting ready to leave the house, keys, wallet, phone. I need to catch the bus. I hope it doesn't rain. These aren't academic sentences. They're real, useful thoughts that help you build automatic fluency. I remember working with Leyla, a learner from Istanbul. She told me she practiced English every day but still froze when it was time to speak. I asked her if she was thinking in English or translating from Turkish. She admitted that she always translated. So I gave her a challenge. For 1 week, she had to think in English during her morning routine. No writing, no speaking out loud, just silent thoughts in English. She started with basic phrases. I'm hungry. Where's my jacket? It's cold today. After just a few days, she told me she felt more confident. Speaking became smoother. She didn't have to pause and translate as much. Thinking in English is not about being perfect. It's about building comfort and speed. When you make this a habit, you start to notice that your brain gets faster. The words come more easily. You stop doubting yourself because you're already used to forming sentences in English before you even speak. Another way to practice is by narrating what you see. Imagine you're walking down the street. Instead of thinking in your native language, try saying in your mind, there's a man with a dog. The bus is late again. I like that building. This type of thinking helps you stay in the language without pressure. There's no one listening, no one to judge. Just you, your thoughts, and your growing fluency. You can also use questions. When you're waiting in line at a store, ask yourself, what do I need to buy? How much will it cost? Do I have enough time? This turns waiting time into learning time. And the best part? You're training your brain in a natural, useful way. Even when you're tired or busy, you can still do this. In fact, the more you think in English during simple moments, the easier it becomes during important ones, like job interviews, phone calls, or speaking in front of others. I want you to know that it's okay if you make mistakes in your thoughts. No one hears them. You're not being tested. You're building a habit. And every time you think in English, you're moving closer to fluency. It might feel strange at first. You might find yourself switching back to your native language without even noticing. That's normal. It takes time. But if you stay consistent, if you keep returning to English in your thoughts, you will see results. One listener from Seoul told me that she started thinking in English while commuting. Every day, during her 30-minute subway ride, she would observe people, read signs, and describe her thoughts in English. After 2 months, she noticed that speaking became less scary. Words came faster. She felt more relaxed in conversations. All because she made the decision to stop translating and start thinking in English. You don't need a perfect environment. You don't need more grammar books or expensive courses. You just need your mind, your day-to-day life, and the willingness to try. Every cup of coffee you make, every dish you wash, every time you unlock your door, these are moments you can turn into practice. Just shift your thoughts from your first language to English, bit by bit, day by day. This small habit can make a huge difference. I encourage you to start today. Pick one task, just one, and describe it to yourself in English. It might feel weird at first, but it will get easier. And soon you'll notice something amazing. Your brain will start to choose English first. You won't have to force it. It will become natural. That's when you know fluency is growing. Let me tell you a story that I think will inspire you, especially if you're looking for simple ways to practice English every day. It's the story of Aisha, a graphic designer from Cairo. When I first connected with her, she was feeling frustrated. She had been learning English for years. She could read articles, understand podcasts, and even write emails pretty well. But when it came to speaking, she felt blocked. Every time she had to talk to a client in English or join an online meeting, her heart would race. She would forget basic words, hesitate, and sometimes even switch back to Arabic without realizing. What stood out to me in our first conversation was how self-aware she was. Aisha told me, "I know I'm not thinking in English. I prepare everything in my head in Arabic first, and that's why I panic." She knew the problem, but she didn't know how to fix it. So I shared a few ideas with her, including one that she turned into something beautiful and powerful. She started using sticky notes, that's right, simple sticky notes. At first, she felt a little silly, but she was determined. She walked around her apartment and began labeling things: mirror, door, window, remote, cupboard. But she didn't stop at nouns. She started writing full, simple phrases. On her bathroom mirror, she placed a note that said, "I'm getting ready for the day." On the fridge, "What should I eat today?" Near her workspace, "Let's get to work and check the emails first." These weren't complicated sentences. They were short, real thoughts she would normally think in Arabic. But now they were in English, always in her visual space, always reminding her brain to stay in the language. Over the next few weeks, she expanded the system. She changed the sticky notes every few days. If she was working on a new design project, she'd put up sentences like, "I need more color options," or "This layout feels too busy." She matched the language to her life. And the best part? These phrases didn't come from a textbook. They came from her reality. I still remember the excitement in her voice during our follow-up. She said, "Julia, it's working. I'm not translating so much anymore. I think in English before I even realize it." What she had done was brilliant. She had transformed her environment into an English-speaking assistant. Her home became her language lab. Every corner reminded her, brain to stay connected to English. That constant visual input made the language feel normal, familiar, and less intimidating. Aisha's story proves something powerful. Small, consistent actions lead to real change. You don't need a perfect accent. You don't need to memorize thousands of words. You just need to create an environment that supports your goal. And that environment starts with what you see, what you say to yourself, and how often you repeat it. She even told me that when friends visited her apartment, they were curious about all the notes. One of her colleagues asked, "Why do you have English phrases all over your house?" And she just smiled and said, "Because I'm becoming fluent, one sentence at a time." That kind of commitment becomes part of your identity. You're not just someone who studies English. You become someone who lives in English. Eventually, she took the idea one step further. She started recording herself reading the phrases out loud. Not to post online, not to impress anyone, just for herself. Listening to her own voice speaking English helped her grow more comfortable, and soon she was responding faster in conversations. She told me that in her last client call, she didn't translate at all. The words came naturally, and she felt proud, not perfect, but confident. Aisha also added another habit. Before she went to sleep, she'd take a quick look at a few sticky notes around her room and say the phrases out loud. Not for grammar, not for memorization, just to keep the language flowing through her mind. Even at the end of the day, it became a small ritual that kept her connected to her goal without pressure. The most important lesson from Aisha's journey is this: fluency is not a single moment. It's not something that appears suddenly. It grows in the background, through repetition, through visibility, through simplicity. It happens when you surround yourself with the language in ways that feel natural, easy, and personal. I think many learners imagine that to improve their speaking, they need to travel or take expensive classes or find native speakers to talk to every day. Those things can help, yes, but they're not the only way. What Aisha did was create her own English world, right inside her apartment in Cairo. She didn't wait for the perfect conditions. She made her daily life the practice ground, and the more she did that, the more her confidence grew. I want you to remember her example. Whether you live in a small apartment or a big house, whether you're in a quiet town or a loud city, your space can become your English teacher. You don't need anything fancy, just a pen, some sticky notes, and a willingness to see your life through the lens of English. Start with your morning routine. What do you usually think when you wake up? Write it in English. Put it near your bed. What do you usually do in the kitchen? Write it in English. Put it near your fridge. Let your walls speak English to you. Let your mirror remind you that you are learning. Let your door say, "Have a great day," before you go out. These small touches change the way you interact with the language. They make English feel like part of your life, not just a subject. And when that happens, your brain starts to adapt. You start to think in English naturally. And speaking becomes less of a performance and more of a habit. Aisha's method might sound simple, and that's because it is. But it's also smart. It respects how the brain learns best, with repetition, with context, and with emotional connection. She chose phrases that meant something to her, that were linked to her real life. That's why it worked, and it can work for you too. You don't need to do exactly what she did. Maybe you use sticky notes, maybe you use a whiteboard, maybe you leave voice notes to yourself. What matters is creating daily reminders of the language you want to speak. Keep it visible, keep it simple, keep it personal. If Aisha can do it, in a busy city like Cairo, while working full-time as a designer, so can you. Her story is not just about sticky notes. It's about building habits that support your fluency. It's about turning your home, your routines, and your thoughts into tools for progress. And it all starts with one sentence at a time. I want to talk about something really important today: how your environment plays a huge role in your language learning journey. It's easy to think that if you don't live in an English-speaking country, your fluency is going to take longer to develop. But that's not true. You don't need to be in New York, London, or Sydney to become fluent. You can create your own English zone right where you are. Whether you're in a small town or a big city, whether you're in your home or at work. Let me explain what I mean by an English zone. This doesn't mean you have to transform your whole life. You don't have to make English the only language you speak 24/7, but it does mean that you intentionally surround yourself with English as much as possible. It's about creating moments throughout your day where English is naturally a part of the environment, even if you're not in an English-speaking country. For example, think about your daily routine. How much of it could involve English if you started paying more attention to it? What if, while you're making your morning coffee, you listen to a podcast in English instead of the news in your native language? Or what if you start your day by setting your phone to English, so that the apps and notifications you get are all in English? These small changes create an atmosphere that supports your learning every day. One of the easiest ways to start building your English zone is by listening to podcasts like this one. There's something really powerful about hearing the language in action. When you listen regularly, even without speaking, you're training your brain to understand how English sounds in different contexts. The more you expose yourself to it, the more natural it will start to feel. And you don't need to be listening to podcasts every minute of your day. Just make it a habit to listen when you're doing things like commuting, cleaning, or even cooking. Every time you listen, you're adding another layer of English to your environment. But let's take it a step further. What about speaking? You might be thinking, but I don't have anyone to talk to in English. Well, let me tell you something. That's going to sound a little strange, but it works. Talk to yourself. Yes, you heard me right. It may feel awkward at first, but talking to yourself in English is an excellent way to practice. You're probably already having conversations in your head, right? So why not make them in English? For instance, when you wake up, instead of saying in your mind, I need to get out of bed, try saying, I need to get out of bed and start my day. Or when you're cooking, instead of thinking, I need to cut the vegetables, say, I need to chop the onions and put them in the pan. You don't need to have full conversations, but speaking those simple sentences out loud can really help. It's your way of getting comfortable with the language, and it's a way to make your thinking process more English-oriented. Now, if you want to take it even further, try recording yourself. You don't need to do it for hours, but just a couple of minutes every day can make a big difference. Record yourself speaking about something you do regularly, like your daily routine or a recent experience. Maybe it's as simple as saying, I went to the store and bought some fruit. Or you can talk about your plans for the day. The important thing is that you're hearing your voice in English, which helps with pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence. When I say record yourself, it's not for perfection. It's just for practice. You don't need to be grammatically perfect, and your accent doesn't need to be flawless. What matters is that you're speaking, that you're making mistakes and learning from them. That's how fluency is built. It's in those small, everyday moments that we really start to develop our ability to speak naturally. Another great way to enhance your English environment is by watching shows or movies in English. But here's the trick. Don't just passively watch. Try to engage with what you're seeing. For example, after watching a scene, pause the video and try to summarize it in English. Or better yet, repeat lines from the show, trying to match the speaker's tone and rhythm. This isn't about memorizing the lines, but about practicing the way the language sounds and flows. It's like having a mini English lesson with real-life examples, and it's super helpful. And if you're someone who loves reading, try to incorporate English into your reading habits. It doesn't have to be a full novel. You can start with simple articles or even Instagram captions. You could read something you enjoy and make a habit of looking up any words you don't know. This way, English becomes a part of your regular world, just like your native language. It's about exposure, consistency, and making the language a natural part of your daily environment. I know this might sound like a lot, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. The key is to start small. Don't try to change everything in your life overnight. Instead, pick one thing to start with today. Maybe it's changing the language settings on your phone or listening to a podcast while you cook. Just start somewhere, and the more you add, the more your English zone will grow. You don't have to go anywhere special to immerse yourself in English. Your home, your car, your favorite cafe, all of these places can become your English space. You just have to decide to make them so. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. The idea is that you're surrounding yourself with English, and little by little, you're making it a natural part of your life. If you're still not sure where to start, I encourage you to try setting up your own English zone today. It could be as simple as changing the language on your phone or listening to an English podcast while you walk. Start small, but start today. You'll be amazed at how quickly your environment can help you improve your English. And the best part? You don't need to leave your home to do it. Your environment is one of your biggest tools for success. So let's use it to our advantage and start building that English zone now. Let's talk about a technique that might feel a bit strange at first, but it's incredibly powerful for building confidence and improving your speaking skills. It's called the mirror technique, and it's as simple as it sounds, speaking to yourself in front of a mirror. Now, I know this might sound odd, but bear with me. This technique can actually do wonders for your English, and I want to explain why. When you speak in front of a mirror, you get to see yourself. You get to observe your facial expressions, your body language, and even your pronunciation. This is something that many learners forget to focus on, how they look and sound when they speak. But trust me, this makes a huge difference in how confident you feel when speaking. When you see yourself speaking in English, it becomes less intimidating. You begin to realize that it's not so scary to speak in front of others because you've already practiced looking at yourself, speaking clearly, and managing your expressions. But why does this work? Well, the mirror technique helps you with a few key things. First, it lets you practice pronunciation. As you speak, you can see if your mouth is forming the words correctly, and you can adjust your movements. This might sound small, but it's one of the best ways to practice because it gives you immediate feedback. Are you opening your mouth enough for those vowel sounds? Are your tongue movements in the right place for certain consonants? When you're aware of these things, it helps you speak more clearly and confidently. Next, the mirror technique gives you a chance to observe your body language. When you speak in English, your body language plays a big part in how you're understood. Do you stand up straight? Do you make eye contact with the mirror? Do you use gestures to help explain yourself? These small things matter more than you might think. Speaking with confidence isn't just about the words you say. It's also about how you present yourself. When you're in front of a mirror, you can see if you're standing up straight or if you're hunched over. You can check if your gestures make sense or if you look a bit stiff. Over time, this helps you become more natural when you speak. But the biggest benefit of the mirror technique is how it helps you practice real-life conversations. I know that many of us feel nervous or shy when we try to speak English in front of others. It's totally normal. But the mirror technique allows you to simulate conversations without the pressure of talking to someone else. You can practice ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, or explaining something to a friend, all in front of the mirror. This lets you get comfortable with the flow of the conversation before you actually have to do it in real life. You can also use the mirror technique to rehearse specific phrases or expressions that you find difficult. For example, maybe you've been struggling to say the word comfortable without tripping over it. Stand in front of the mirror and say it several times until it feels natural. The mirror gives you a chance to focus on the sounds and how you say them, which can help you gain confidence when speaking. It's not just about saying the words correctly. It's about saying them with the right attitude and confidence. Let me tell you about Tomas, our friend from Warsaw, who used this technique as part of his journey to fluency. Tomas used to struggle with his English during job interviews. He knew the words, but when he was in front of someone, he'd freeze. His mind would go blank, and he would worry too much about making mistakes. He tried many different ways to improve his English, but it wasn't until he started using the mirror technique that he noticed real progress. Every day, Tomas would stand in front of the mirror and rehearse answers to common interview questions. He would look himself in the eye and say the answers out loud. At first, he felt awkward. He didn't feel confident at all, but over time, he started to notice a shift. He became more relaxed, and his answers became smoother. Tomas also used the mirror to practice small, everyday conversations. When he was in the kitchen, he would pretend he was explaining a recipe to someone. When he was getting dressed, he would practice asking for directions. The mirror helped him simulate these everyday situations, and he started to feel less anxious when he encountered them in real life. The more Tomas practiced in front of the mirror, the more confident he became. Eventually, he could sit in front of a hiring manager during an interview and speak clearly, without hesitating, because he had already gone through the conversation in his head and in front of the mirror so many times. What started as an uncomfortable and awkward practice became a powerful tool for building his confidence. It helped him speak with more ease, more clarity, and ultimately more confidence in his abilities. So how can you get started with this technique? It's simple. You don't need a special setup or equipment. Just stand in front of a mirror and start speaking. You can start small. Maybe today you'll practice introducing yourself in English. Or maybe you'll try explaining something you do every day, like making a cup of coffee or going to the store. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel. And the key is to do this consistently. Try to speak in front of the mirror every day, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes. Over time, you'll see a noticeable improvement in both your confidence and your speaking ability. Remember, the mirror technique is not about being perfect. It's not about saying everything without mistakes. It's about building comfort and confidence. It's about seeing yourself in action, practicing your speaking skills, and becoming more comfortable with the process. The more you do it, the easier it will get, and the more confident you will feel when you speak English in real-life situations. Give it a try and see how it works for you. You might feel a little awkward at first, but keep going. It's one of the most effective ways to improve your speaking skills and build the confidence you need to speak English with ease. Let me tell you the story of May, a young woman from Shanghai who struggled with speaking English confidently. May was incredibly shy and often avoided speaking in public because she was afraid of making mistakes. Like many of us, she knew the language in theory. She could understand English, she could read it, and even write it fairly well. But when it came time to speak, her mind would go blank, and the fear of saying something wrong would take over. Sound familiar? May's challenge wasn't that she didn't know enough English. It was that she didn't have the confidence to express herself. She wanted to improve her speaking skills, but she felt stuck. She didn't have anyone to practice with regularly, and this made it even harder. After all, how do you get better at speaking a language if you don't have anyone to speak with? This is a dilemma many learners face, especially when they're not living in an English-speaking country. May, like many of us, was in this exact situation. But one day, May decided to take matters into her own hands. She knew that waiting for the perfect situation to practice wasn't going to help her. She couldn't change the fact that she didn't have regular speaking partners, but she could change how she practiced. May started to use something simple but incredibly powerful, the mirror technique. Every day, she would stand in front of the mirror and speak in English, even if it was just for a few minutes. At first, it felt strange. It felt awkward, and she felt like she was talking to herself. But she stuck with it. What she noticed over time was that it began to help her relax. She wasn't focusing on what other people might think of her. She was simply speaking to herself. She could see her expressions, her body language, and the way her mouth moved when she spoke. This allowed her to notice areas she needed to improve, like her posture or how she pronounced certain words. Slowly, May started to feel more comfortable with her voice in English. The fear of making mistakes wasn't as overwhelming because she was no longer speaking to an audience but to herself in a safe space. But the mirror technique wasn't the only thing May did to improve her speaking. She took it a step further. May started recording short videos of herself speaking in English. Every day she would pick a topic, something simple like describing her day, talking about her hobbies, or sharing her thoughts on a recent movie she watched. She didn't worry about making it perfect. She just focused on speaking, even if it meant stumbling over a word or making a mistake. She recorded the videos with no pressure, knowing that these were just practice. May would watch the videos back, and at first, she was critical of herself. She noticed all the mistakes, all the little things she could have said differently. But over time, something amazing happened. She stopped focusing on her mistakes so much. Instead, she began to see the progress. She could hear her voice becoming clearer, more natural. She could see her confidence growing. Each video was a small step forward, a little improvement, and it was enough to keep her going. What's truly powerful about May's story is how she used what she had at her disposal. She didn't have conversation partners, but she had the mirror, her phone, and the courage to try something new. She didn't wait for the ideal situation or the perfect conditions. She made the most of her environment and took action. Even though she was shy and unsure of herself at first, she didn't let that stop her from practicing. And as she kept up with her daily practice, May noticed something incredible. She started speaking more naturally, more confidently. When she found herself in real conversations, whether in person or over the phone, she didn't freeze as much anymore. She felt more comfortable expressing herself. She had already rehearsed so many times in front of the mirror and heard herself speaking on video that when it was time for the real conversation, It didn't feel so intimidating. I know that many of you might be in a similar situation to May. Maybe you don't have a speaking partner or you feel shy when it comes to speaking out loud. But what May's story shows us is that you don't need a perfect situation to improve. All you need is the willingness to take small, consistent steps and to make the most of what you already have. If you don't have a partner to practice with, don't worry. You can still improve your speaking by using the tools around you. The mirror technique and recording videos are simple yet effective ways to build confidence. You don't need anyone else to start practicing. You have everything you need within your reach. The key is to take that first step, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. May didn't let the lack of a conversation partner stop her from improving. She created her own practice environment, one that was comfortable and low pressure. And as she practiced daily, she gained the confidence she needed to speak more freely and naturally. If she can do it, so can you. Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about progress. Every time you speak, whether it's to yourself in the mirror, in a video, or with a conversation partner, you're improving. Don't let fear or shyness hold you back. Use the tools around you and take advantage of every opportunity to practice. Just like May, you'll see how small, consistent actions can lead to big improvements. One of the most effective ways to improve your English speaking skills quickly is to integrate small, real-life conversations into your daily routine. I know. Many of you probably feel like you need to dedicate hours of study every day to improve. But let me tell you, it's not about long hours of passive study. It's about the small, consistent moments where you actually speak the language. So, let's talk about how you can use these little daily opportunities to practice speaking English. Think about it. How many times do you find yourself speaking to others during the day, but in your native language? It could be ordering coffee, talking to a coworker, or asking for directions. Now imagine if you took these small moments and started using them to practice English. This is a simple but incredibly powerful way to improve your fluency. Let's start with something as simple as ordering food. Picture yourself at your favorite restaurant or cafe. Instead of using your native language, challenge yourself to order in English. It doesn't have to be a long, complicated sentence. Just a simple, "Can I have a coffee with milk, please?" Or, "I'd like to try the pasta today." These are basic conversations, but they're real and relevant to your daily life. Plus, when you start speaking in English in real situations like these, you're not just practicing your speaking skills, you're also building your confidence. And confidence is key when it comes to speaking a new language. But it doesn't stop there. There are countless small moments throughout the day that you can turn into English practice opportunities. When you're walking down the street and you see someone, instead of simply nodding or saying hi in your native language, challenge yourself to ask them a simple question in English. For example, "Excuse me, do you know where the nearest subway station is?" Or, "How far is the park from here?" Even if it's just a brief exchange, it's an opportunity to practice, to push yourself a little further, and to feel more comfortable using English in real-world situations. Another great way to integrate English into your daily life is by using conversation apps. These apps are designed specifically to help you practice English with other people around the world, and the best part is, you can do it whenever you have a few minutes to spare. Whether you're sitting on the bus or waiting in line, you can open up your app and have a quick chat with someone in English. It's not about having long, complicated conversations right away. It's about building the habit of speaking regularly, even if it's just for a few minutes each day. And these little conversations really do add up. Over time, you'll notice that your ability to express yourself becomes easier and more natural. You could also practice with your friends or family, even if they're not learning English themselves. Just casually ask them questions or make small talk in English. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment. These small interactions are the perfect opportunities to practice what you've learned and to build your fluency. One of the best parts about using these short conversations to practice is that they don't require a lot of preparation. You Don't need to study vocabulary for hours or memorize grammar rules. All you need to do is take advantage of the moments that are already happening in your day. It could be as simple as asking for a recommendation at a store or giving directions to someone who's lost. The more you do this, the easier it will become. And before you know it, speaking in English will just be a normal part of your day. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, but Julia, I'm not ready for real conversations yet. That's perfectly okay. You don't need to be fluent to start using English in small ways. You just need to start somewhere. You can begin with phrases and sentences you're already comfortable with, and then slowly build up as you gain more confidence. The key is to just begin speaking, even if it feels a little scary or uncomfortable at first. The more you practice, the more you'll see improvement, and the more natural it will feel to speak English in these daily moments. I've seen it happen time and time again with learners. They think they need to dedicate hours each day to study, but it's the consistent small conversations that really move the needle forward. These daily practices don't need to take up much time, but they make a huge difference when it comes to building your fluency and confidence. Another tip is to challenge yourself to talk to yourself in English. It might sound funny, but it's a great way to practice. Let's say you're preparing dinner or getting ready for the day. As you go about your tasks, narrate what you're doing in English. I'm cutting the vegetables now, or I need to put my shoes on. The more you practice thinking in English and speaking out loud, the easier it becomes to speak in more complex situations. It's just another way to reinforce the language and make it feel like a more natural part of your day. Remember, the key is consistency. It's not about how many hours you spend studying. It's about how often you actually use English in your daily life. By practicing in small, manageable ways every day, you're steadily improving your speaking skills. It doesn't matter if you're just asking someone for the time or ordering a coffee, these small conversations will add up and make a big difference in your fluency. So take a few minutes today and think about how you can start including short conversations in your daily routine. Whether it's with a stranger, a friend, or even yourself, these little moments are powerful. They help you build confidence, get comfortable with speaking, and ultimately become more fluent in English. And remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be consistent. The more you practice, the easier and more natural it will feel. Just take the leap and start practicing in these small, everyday moments. You'll be amazed at how much progress you'll make. One of the most common obstacles I see people face when trying to improve their English is the pressure to be perfect. I get it. Many of us want to speak English flawlessly, just like the native speakers we hear in movies or TV shows. But I need to tell you something important. Perfection is not the goal. In fact, it might actually be holding you back. When I say practice over perfection, I mean that the key to improving your English is not about avoiding mistakes, but embracing them. Mistakes are actually a crucial part of the process. They're not something to be afraid of or ashamed of. They're opportunities for learning. Every time you make a mistake and correct it, you're one step closer to fluency. Think about it. When you were a child learning to speak your native language, did you speak perfectly from the start? Of course not. You probably made lots of mistakes along the way. But every time you made a mistake, you got better, right? English is the same. The more you practice, the more mistakes you'll make, and the more you'll improve. I know this might sound a bit scary for some of you. You might be afraid of sounding foolish or being misunderstood. But here's the thing. When you make mistakes, you're learning. And it's not just about learning the words or the grammar. It's about building confidence in your ability to communicate. Every mistake is a learning opportunity that helps you get closer to speaking naturally and confidently. Let me give you a real-life example. I want you to meet Tomas, the character from earlier in our journey. Remember, he was stuck because he focused so much on trying to sound perfect that he froze in real conversations. He was afraid of making mistakes, and this fear kept him from practicing. The turning point for Tomas came when he realized that his mistakes were not his enemy, they were his teachers. Once he started embracing his errors, he was able to speak more freely, and his fluency improved dramatically. I want you to think about your own journey for a moment. When was the last time you avoided speaking because you didn't want to make a mistake? Maybe you were afraid of using the wrong word, or you worried that someone might laugh at you. But the truth is, no one will laugh at you for trying, and your mistakes don't define you. What defines you is your willingness to keep going, even when it's not perfect. Now, I'm not saying that you should just throw caution to the wind and speak without any care for accuracy. Of course, it's important to learn the right grammar and vocabulary. But, and this is really important, if you wait until you're perfect before speaking, you'll never speak. Fluency comes from practice, and practice comes from speaking, even when it's not perfect. Think about it like this. The more you speak, the more mistakes you'll make, and the more you'll learn. And the more you learn, the more confident you'll become. Confidence is one of the most important things in language learning. If you wait to be perfect before speaking, you're always going to be stuck in that cycle of doubt and hesitation. But if you just start speaking, mistakes, and all, you'll be amazed at how quickly you improve. I want you to remember this. The goal is not to speak like a native speaker or to sound perfect. The goal is to communicate. And communication is about making yourself understood. Sometimes that means using simple words, repeating yourself, or even explaining something in a different way. The important thing is that you're getting your message across. Think about your favorite language learning moments. I bet they didn't happen when you were sitting quietly studying grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists. I'm sure your best moments came when you were actually speaking, maybe with a friend, or maybe when you were traveling, or maybe when you were just going about your day and decided to take a chance and speak in English. It was in those moments of real communication that you grew the most. You know, there's something powerful about accepting that you're going to make mistakes. When you do that, you free yourself from the pressure to be perfect, and you give yourself permission to just speak. And that's when real progress happens. The more you speak, the more comfortable you'll feel, and the more natural it will become. Eventually, you'll stop worrying about making mistakes and start focusing on the message you're sharing. Let's take a moment to think about the pressure we often put on ourselves. We think that speaking perfectly means using complex vocabulary and flawless grammar. But in reality, the most effective speakers are often those who speak simply, clearly, and confidently. You don't need to know all the big words or use the most advanced grammar structures to get your point across. In fact, most of the time, it's better to keep things simple. If you can say something in a clear and straightforward way, you're already doing better than someone who's trying to impress others with fancy vocabulary and complicated sentences. Now I know that some of you might be wondering, but Julia, what if I make a really big mistake? Well, let me tell you something. Making mistakes is a part of being human. And when you make a mistake in English, it's not the end of the world. In fact, the more mistakes you make, the closer you get to fluency. So, don't let the fear of making mistakes hold you back. It's okay to be imperfect. What's important is that you keep practicing. You might be surprised by how much progress you can make when you let go of the fear of being perfect. Once you start speaking without worrying about mistakes, you'll start speaking more naturally, and the fluency will follow. The key to becoming fluent is not about avoiding mistakes, it's about embracing them as part of the journey. So I challenge you today. The next time you have an opportunity to speak English, take it. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect sentence. Just speak. Make mistakes, laugh at them, and keep going. Every mistake you make brings you one step closer to fluency. Practice over perfection. That's the key to success. Let me tell you the story of Lucas, a man from São Paulo, Brazil, whose journey is one that many of you can relate to. When Lucas first started learning English, he was filled with doubt and insecurities. Like many of you, he was worried about his accent. He thought that because he didn't sound like a native speaker, his English wasn't good enough. He hesitated to speak in front of others because of this fear. Every time he practiced, he felt like his accent was holding him back, and this fear started to affect his confidence. Lucas would avoid speaking with others in English, and when he did, he would freeze. The more he thought about how he sounded, the harder it became to speak. This is something I see often. People focusing so much on their pronunciation or trying to sound perfect that they end up not speaking at all. And as you know, if you're not speaking, you're not improving. One day, Lucas realized something important. His fear was preventing him from reaching his potential. He knew that in order to get better, he had to overcome his fear of speaking, no matter how imperfect it seemed. So, he decided to take a big step. He joined several online groups where people from all over the world were practicing English. And you know what? That decision changed everything. At first, Lucas was still nervous. He was unsure about speaking with strangers, especially because he worried about his accent. But little by little, he started practicing more often. At first, he would join simple conversations, just listening and learning from others. Then, he started speaking. And at first, it wasn't perfect. Far from it. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he was speaking, and with every conversation, he became more comfortable. In those online groups, Lucas made mistakes, and that was okay. He learned that nobody was judging him for his accent. In fact, everyone was focused on improving together, and the goal wasn't perfection, it was communication. As he kept practicing, his confidence grew. He started to realize that speaking with others wasn't about sounding perfect, but about expressing his thoughts clearly. His accent didn't matter as much as he thought. What mattered was his ability to get his message across. As Lucas continued to practice, he noticed something incredible happening in his life. His newfound confidence didn't just stop with his English. He began to speak up more at work. He felt more comfortable voicing his ideas and interacting with his colleagues, including those who spoke English fluently. One day, after a presentation he gave in English, his boss pulled him aside and told him that his communication skills had greatly improved. His confidence was noticed, and because of that, he was offered a promotion at work. His success in English directly influenced his career, and that was a huge turning point for him. Lucas's story is a reminder of something very important. Even when we feel insecure, even when we're afraid of making mistakes, we can still move forward. Fear doesn't have to hold us back. Lucas could have let his fear of speaking with an accent stop him, but instead, he faced his fear head-on. And by taking action, by practicing regularly, and by not giving up, he made incredible progress. He overcame his doubts, and now he's in a much stronger position at work and in his life. I know that many of you might be feeling the same way Lucas did at the beginning of his journey. You might feel insecure about your accent, or you might worry that you're not speaking perfectly enough. But let me tell you something. Your accent is part of who you are. It's a reflection of your identity, and it should never be something that stops you from speaking. If Lucas, with his insecurities, can overcome his fear and advance in his career, so can you. The key to Lucas's success was consistency. He didn't try to fix everything at once. He simply took small steps every day. He joined groups, spoke with others, and didn't let mistakes get him down. Each conversation, each mistake, brought him closer to the fluent, confident speaker he wanted to be. And the more he practiced, the more he realized that his accent didn't matter as much as his ability to communicate. It was his willingness to take action despite his fears that made the difference, and that's something that's available to you too. You don't need to wait until your English is perfect or until you sound like a native speaker. What matters is that you keep going even when it's difficult. What matters is that you take action, no matter how small. Every conversation, You have every word you speak brings you closer to your goal. The fear you're feeling now is normal, but don't let it stop you from speaking. Just like Lucas, you can find success if you keep pushing forward. Lucas's journey shows us that overcoming fear is a huge part of learning any language. It's not just about knowing the words or the grammar. It's about feeling confident enough to speak. And confidence comes from practice. If you take one step today, even if it's small, you're already on the right path. Lucas's story is a powerful reminder that persistence is key. He kept going, even when he wasn't perfect, and now he's reaping the rewards of his hard work. If he can do it, so can you. Don't be afraid to take that first step, no matter how scared or unsure you might feel. You are capable of more than you think. And just like Lucas, you can achieve your goals with a little practice, a lot of persistence, and the courage to speak, even if you're not perfect yet. As we reach the end of this episode, I want to take a moment to encourage you to reflect on everything we've discussed today. You've heard stories of people just like you, who faced challenges but found ways to improve their English. You've learned practical tips that you can start using right away. Now, it's time to think about your own journey. I want you to ask yourself, what's one small thing you can do today to speak more English? Maybe you can start using the mirror technique that we discussed earlier, or perhaps you can record yourself speaking and listen to it to see where you can improve. It could be as simple as choosing one short conversation to have in English today, or setting up your environment to encourage more English exposure, just like we talked about with Aisha and Tomas. The key is to take one step, no matter how small, and actually do it. Think about it for a moment. What's one thing you can apply from this episode to your life right now? It might feel overwhelming to think about everything at once, but I promise that if you focus on just one thing, you'll start to see progress. You don't need to do everything today. Just pick one tip or idea that stands out to you and commit to using it in the next 24 hours. Even the smallest action can create momentum, and that's where the magic happens. Maybe it's deciding to think in English more often throughout the day, even in simple situations like when you're making coffee or walking to work. Maybe it's speaking to yourself in front of a mirror for 5 minutes, practicing your pronunciation and gaining confidence. Or it could be making a point to listen to an English podcast while you're doing household chores, turning those moments into an opportunity for language exposure. Whatever it is, just take that first step. I know that when you make the decision to apply one of these strategies, you'll start seeing the benefits right away. The key is consistency. Don't worry about doing everything perfectly. It's not about being flawless, it's about being persistent. Every small action you take gets you closer to your goal. So, what will you choose? What's the one small thing you can do today to speak more English? Remember, it's the small, consistent efforts that will lead to big changes over time. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect situation to start. Start now, in the next 24 hours, and see how much progress you can make. I want to thank you for joining me on this episode. I hope that the tips and stories we shared today will inspire you to keep pushing forward with your English learning. Remember, fluency doesn't come overnight, but with dedication and practice, you will improve. Keep using these techniques and continue making small changes every day. That's how you'll start to see the results you want. And of course, I'd love for you to join us again in the next episode. There's always more to learn, more to practice, and more to improve. So take a moment to think about that one small action you can take today. And don't forget to come back for more tips, stories, and strategies to help you keep evolving in your English speaking journey. Thank you once again for being here. And I'm looking forward to hearing about your progress. Keep up the great work, and I'll see you next time.